I have opinions about how responsive government should be to its citizens. Here in America, we live in a representative democracy, which basically means that we democratically elect people to represent us in government. We don't democratically vote on every issue, but rather we elect people to handle that stuff for us. Congress is divided into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. These two houses are intended to act as a check on each other. The House, whose members are elected every 2 years, is supposed to reflect the rapidly changing priorities of the country, swaying with the will of the people. They're elected frequently so that we don't end up with an establishment that begins to serve itself rather than the people they represent. That's not always how it works, but that's the intention. The Senate, whose members serve for 6 years with rotating elections, are supposed to be the more stable institution. Their longer terms and rotating election schedule means that they're not as subject to the whims of trends and fashion. They're intended to make sure that the country doesn't change too much too rapidly, balancing with the rapid changes in the House. And then we have the President, whose job is to execute the laws created by Congress. Given all that, and the intentions of the creators of our government, I've come up with a formula for how responsive each part of the government should be to its citizens. Members of the House of Representatives should be the most responsive to the people they represent. When an issue comes before them, they should be relying 2/3 on the will of the people they represent and only 1/3 on their own preference. In other words, they should be constantly checking in with their constituents for feedback and siding with them most of the time, even when that's not the way they would personally vote. In short, they should be very responsive to the whims and tides of the public. And if the representative can't do this, they should be held accountable in 2 years when their term is up. Senators, on the other hand, are entrusted with more authority. They should be responsive to their constituents, but when the people elect a senator, they are basically saying to that senator that they trust this person to keep the country stable and to be above the changing tides of the public. As such, I think senators should act on their own initiative 2/3 of the time and be receptive to the will of their constituents the rest of the time, mostly when public outcry is overwhelming. Finally, the president is not subject to the whims of the people, at least not in the same way that members of Congress are. Unlike representatives and senators, who each represent somewhat manageable chunks of the country, the president represents the entire country. Gauging the will of the entire country at once is difficult. Luckily, our government has a built-in proxy for the will of the people: Congress. Given that, and the fact that the president's job is to execute the laws created by Congress, the president's actions and policies should reflect the will of Congress most of the time, at least 2/3 of the time, particularly in domestic matters. However, our executive branch is designed to be a vigorous one, so the rest of the time the president should feel free to interpret and enforce laws as they see fit, particularly in matters of military and foreign relations. So to recap, the House should be 2/3 the will of the people, 1/3 their own initiative. The Senate should be 2/3 their own initiative and 1/3 the will of the people, and the President should be 2/3 the will of Congress and 1/3 their own initiative. Does that make sense? That's what I've been thinking about lately. Thanks for watching. See you next time.